All right. Next question here. Question number 3. What should I do with my dog that has human-influenced behaviors not caused by me? In parentheses, I adopted the dog, and it already had those behaviors.
Oh, this is a good one. What? I'm
going to give the short and sweet answer.
Okay.
Stop using it as an excuse to not train the behaviors away. Well, listen, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You're saying human influence behaviors that I didn't create. Then uncreate them. Tell the dog you don't want him to do them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's no different than every single dog that comes into our care that has behavioral issues that were created by something. We train those behaviors away. I mean, like hire a trainer and figure out how to stop those behaviors.
Yeah.
This is the same thing as and not to berate on anybody right now, but like the same deals people tell me, oh, I'm trying to stop jumping, but like every time my mom comes over, she just makes the dog jump all over her. Well, tell the dog to not jump all over her.
Yeah.
I mean, like don't use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's like they almost they try to find excuses for their dog's behavior so they don't have to feel like they're not doing something correct and working through it, you know? As opposed to, listen, you're probably doing something incorrect, which is why the dog is still doing it, right?
Yeah.
This is where you get into dog training, right? And particularly behavioral issues are so relationship-based, right? The individual relationship that you have with this dog will dictate what that dog does in your presence. Right? Yep. This is why us as dog trainers hear repeatedly over and over again from people, my dog is just, they're so good as soon as they see you, Well, yeah, because we have a relationship with that dog where that dog knows that they're not going to get away with anything. Yeah. So what does that say about you? That says that you do not have a relationship with that dog of that dog not getting away with anything. That tells me this dog gets away with everything with you.
Yep.
So what do? You got to get more consistent. Mm-hmm. You got to discipline the dog a little bit more. You have to have clear expectations of the dog in order to work through those things.
Yep.
So, again, regardless of what anybody does, right? If here's the thing. If I'm not present, I can't control what my dogs do. If I go to town for a week and my parents have one of my dogs, I can't control what happens there. Right? I've told stories before about coming to pick my one dog, Vera, up, who doesn't jump on anything, and I walk up to the front door, and I see her put her little paws up on the front door to see what's going on out the door, Yeah. She never does that around me, but apparently she gets away with it there, right? Yeah. I've said stories before about one of my dogs stealing food off the counter or something there, which they don't do that here, right? Yeah. They never do that here. But when I'm not there, I don't know what they're doing. I can't control that.
No.
Right? All I can do is I can control what happens when I'm present. So the second I'm present again, guess what? All that stuff goes out the window. They're back, they're behaved, and they know what they can't get away with me. Because regardless of what anybody does, I don't care if somebody walks into my house and begs my dogs to jump all over them, or hangs a steak halfway off the counter and says, here you go, eat this thing right here. My dogs know they can't do it because I will not allow it regardless of what that other person is doing. And you have to adopt that mentality with this kind of stuff, because if you don't, you will be constantly at the mercy of what everybody else is doing, which shows that you're a poor leader for your dog, which shows that your dog is going to assume that leadership role of doing whatever they want to do.
Yep.
Right? So unless you say, I can control the environment around me, I can control my dog in these different situations, I can stop these behavioral issues that somebody else created,
you're
not going to get anywhere. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of the hard truth of this kind of stuff. You got to step up to the plate a little bit.
Yep.
You know?
Take it on.
Take it on. All right, next one. Now, let me add one more caveat onto that here. In addition to adopting that mentality, yes, we should make sure that we're removing the reinforcement of those behaviors in the first place, right? So even though my dogs know not to jump on somebody that's begging them to jump on them, I'm going to make sure that that person knows, don't fucking do that with my dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
even though they know that they can get away with things here or there or this or that, I still tell my parents, don't let her do that when I'm not there, right? Because it makes it more fair for the dog, right? Even though my dog knows what they can get away with me, or what they can't get away with me, and what they can get away with other people, if those other people are doing those things constantly, it doesn't make it harder. It just becomes less fair that they can get away with it sometimes and not other times.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, next one. 4, can you expand more on reactivity and owners? I mean, we just talked a lot about reactivity in question 2 and the idea of how we go about addressing those things. But what I will do is I will break down what dog reactivity is and what typically causes it, right? So, dog reactivity is a frustrated response that typically stems from a dog being on a leash, reacting at a trigger, so dog or people, whatever, that typically makes that thing go away, right? Dog reactivity, typically speaking, you have 2 kinds of it. You have the kind coming from the dog that's really scared and insecure, and in that case, dog is reacting, barking, growling, this, that at the dog to try to make that dog go away. So they're essentially making a big scene so that they don't have to approach that dog. And then you have the kind of the dog that just gets really, really amped up and excited and gets pissed off that there's something holding them back from getting to the thing they want to get to.
Yeah.
And it, builds up and shows itself in this big display. Both of them are addressed the same, right? Both of them are caused by slightly different things, though, right? So the dog reactivity from the scared, fearful standpoint typically is caused by too much on-leash greetings, where the dog is like, God, why do these dogs keep coming up to me all the time? Why aren't you doing anything about this? Oh, I'll just handle it myself and make that thing go away, right?
Yeah.
The excitable one is typically caused from poor leash manners. It's typically caused from some on-leash greetings as well, because that frustrated response of pulling into the other dog and getting jacked up every time they see them and stuff like that tends to be the case. Again, both are addressed very similarly, right? Now, what was I going to say? So those are the 2 different types of it. Like I said, it's caused typically by on-leash greetings, poor leash manners. Owners tend to contribute quite a bit into this because we tend to, when we start seeing these behaviors, start doing a lot of reassuring and petting and trying to console or allowing the dog to get away with certain things.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, it's the most difficult behavioral issue to work through, only because there's so many like false misconceptions about it, right? Like most people just don't understand it well enough, right?
Yeah.
When I tell people the first time, almost every single person, when I tell them, you're not allowed to let your dog interact with other dogs when they're on the leash, they're like, what? Why can't I do that? And then I go through the whole process of explaining why and explaining what happens. Where again, you're pulling up, you're creating frustration. They're digging into that leash, and that frustrated response builds itself up over time. This doesn't happen overnight like everybody seems to think that it does. What happens is little by little, they get a little more aroused, a little more aroused, a little more frustrated, a little more frustrated. Then they start whining a little bit. Then they start chirping a little bit. Then they start full on barking. Then the hackles come up. And it's just this huge build up into this really, really bad behavior.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the gist of dog reactivity. I mean, again, we work through it by creating first good leash manners, because a lot of times that leash creates the initial problem, right? So we create good leash manners where the dog understands that leash is not something that's holding them back from getting to these things. So you can at least remove that tension that creates a lot of that frustration. We socialize the dog in controlled settings, obviously, to make sure that they don't have negative associations with other dogs in the first place.
Yeah.
And then we start exposing them to this kind of stuff in a controlled manner where they realize the dogs aren't coming up to them. We're not going to let you engage with the other dog, and you're going to be able to be around this thing and essentially get neutralized to it to some extent. Where every time, just like we talked about in question 2, every time they pass by and you keep it under control and we don't let them approach, your anxiety level will come down a little bit, and it'll come down a little bit, and it'll come down a little bit. But one of the things you got to accept is the owner, going back to explaining the owner side of things, is you have to be able to maintain your composure and your cool in these types of situations. A lot of people, when that dog starts reacting, they start getting, they freak out, right? They're yelling, they're screaming, they're doing this, they're doing that. Everything goes out the window. Where I've had so many situations where when I work with reactive dogs, it's like, no. Dog's losing it at the end of the leash. No, can't do that. Down. Whatever, this, that. Yeah. And you stay calm and you make the dog come down to your energy level as opposed to the other way around. You you don't act, you don't react, right? You just act in the first place, right? Don't react to the dog reacting, right? Be more proactive about making sure you're coaching the dog successfully through this kind of stuff. Yeah. So I don't know what else there is really to talk about it past that. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward concept. We have numerous YouTube videos on it you could watch. I think question 2 really answered that one a little bit more in depth.
I think closer for that is I feel like there's just like a lot of misinformation out there saying instead of it's the leash's fault, it's your dog's fault. Like, you know, and people just don't even think about what the leash is doing to aggravate their dog or the other dog.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other side of things, going back to what you just said about it's the dog's fault versus the leash's fault, everybody looks at this and they think, oh my God, I have an aggressive dog.
Yeah.
Which is not the case. I mean, I have hardly ever seen a correlation between dog reactivity and actual dog aggression issues. Right? It is a frustrated display of just freaking out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
I'm being yoinked right now while I'm trying. Yeah. You know, like it's a very frustrating thing. Like,
yeah. Sure. You know? Yelling, screaming, vocalizing. It's, you know, it's just... There's so much energy from all ends of the spectrum with it. And the first thing you gotta do is you gotta just chill out. And you gotta just stay loose on that leash and not choke up all the time. You gotta start training the dog and you gotta start just working them through this stuff. If you look at dog reactivity as not this independent thing, right? You just look at it as a distraction, everything changes.
Yeah.
Right? It's no different than a UPS truck, right? If your dog is whatever, doesn't like UPS trucks or gets distracted by them. You know, it's like, you don't look at that as like, oh my God, my dog has UPS truck reactivity. UPS. You know what I mean? It's not like its own thing. It's just my dog gets distracted by UPS trucks.
Yeah.
My dog gets distracted by dogs. My dog gets distracted by people. And you need to work through that distraction just like you would with anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much just as simple as that, you know? Yes, some of those are higher or lower distractions than others, but just like we were talking about with deer and squirrels and stuff, it's still just a distraction. And if you could pick a command, whatever your dog's best command is, and you could work on that command in the presence of these other distractions, you start to understand that, oh, wow, like I'm not even worried about the other dog. My dog's not even worried about the other dog. We're just focusing on something that my dog knows how to do well. Right? But the problem is, because of the society we live in, and because we live in a society where every dog needs to be best friends with every dog, every dog needs to be best friends with every person and stuff like that, we make those just distractions so much more novel to the dog, right? And so much more arousing and exciting than any other distraction that there may be, that it makes it more challenging to work through, right? Because we make it this own thing. We make it this crazy thing, right? Dog reactivity, typically speaking, is an owner-created issue. You know?
Yeah.